What's good? It's your boy George here for another another episode of Ask George. This time, Mrs. Keiper's classes wanted to know, how did it all begin with ancient Greece? They basically were like, George, bruh, what do I need to know? What do I need to know before studying ancient Greece? So I'm just gonna give you like the in a nutshell, real quick version of things that you should know before starting to learn about ancient Greek cultures specifically. First of all, you already know that people started in Mesopotamia, right? We call this the cradle of life. That's where all humans begin, your hominin groups, right? Eventually, we get to the civilization of ancient Egypt. You know all about that now. And then from Egypt, tons of time later, people then decide to migrate north and they cross the Mediterranean Sea. You know where that is. And they end up in an island called Crete. So if you close your eyes real quick and picture that Greek map that you know so well. That's that little island off the southern tip of Greece, off of the mainland of Greece. So the first people to settle here are going to be called. The first people who settled here are going to be called the Minoans, and they land here in about 3000 BCE. But before we get to them, why Greece is cool in general and really fun to learn about in terms of ancient culture, because so much stuff happened in ancient Greece that actually inspired life today in Western culture, for me in the 1700s and for you guys in the 21st century. For example, in the 3rd century, they came up with the law of buoyancy and, dense mass and what's going to float and what's not, which is pretty clever for an ancient civilization. We also come up with the idea of like heliocentrism, or the idea of the earth revolving around the sun and not the other way around, which, oh my gosh, humans aren't the center of the universe. It's a big deal. You have other philosophers like Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, and obviously these are big names that we still study and learn from today. So it's a really exciting culture. You guys are gonna love it. Anyway, back to Crete. So in 3000 BC, the first people to land in Crete are going to end up being called the Minoans. This culture is going to last for about 2,000 years, and these people were really good craftsmen and artists. So they were really skilled at making tools and weapons, particularly out of bronze. So that's as a natural resource. They would mine it, they would hammer it into tools and weapons, and this kind of exposed them to other countries for trade, places that wanted weapons like that. In exchange, they would get things they didn't have that were not native to Greece, so that trade kind of helped them flourish as a culture. From that, they developed, language and more arts and really cool architecture. Like, they loved making these really ornate palaces and things like that. They also painted frescoes, which is really important for historians. Frescoes are really detailed paintings of daily life. So these frescoes allowed us to study and see what life was like. For example, there's a lot of frescoes that show us favorite pastimes or hobbies, like bull jumping. There's a lot of frescoes that have bull jumping, which was really a popular sport back then. After the Minoans kind of start to decline after like 1600 BCE, their civilization declines very quickly, and we're not really sure why. There's a lot of different theories, like volcanoes and natural disasters and disease and whatever, but nothing really sticks. So we're not exactly sure what the real reason was. Next up is the Mycenaeans. So this group of people were big from like 1600 to like 1100 BCE, and their focus was mainly living in mainland Greece. So they moved a little north from that island, and they live in mainland Greece. Their culture thrived. They grew very quickly. They already had a foundation for them from the Minoans. And the Mycenaeans were known particularly for their Trojan War. This was a war between the Greeks and the Trojans over a lady named Helen. Maybe you've heard of Helen of Troy. The Greeks won that war and like totally destroyed the Trojans, and they end up going into the city of Troy and completely destroying that. So that's the Trojan War. After this, the Dorians are a tribe like all the way up in northern Greece. They creep their way down. They're really strong. They're like military monsters. They're really good at fighting, and they kind of push their way into central Greece around 12 to 1100 BCE. And these guys crushed the Mycenaeans, and that's kind of the end of that Great Bronze culture. So those are just some things to know before we get into, the depths of Greek culture and language and belief systems and political systems and all that kind of stuff that we love to talk about. So you guys are going to love it. Enjoy, and I'll talk to you soon.